to our parent session, a parent orientation session for animal sciences. My name is Kim Grubbs. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am an academic success coordinator within the Department of Animal Sciences, and I'm going to have my colleague introduce herself as well.
Hello everyone, my name is Kayla Dwyer. I am also an advisor in the Department of Animal Sciences, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers.
So Kayla and I will be with you through this session today, and we are there's three at this time full-time academic success coordinators, as well as right now we are looking to bring on 1 to 2 more permanent academic success coordinators, and so we're using as well, we have some advising assistants that are also helping us with the incoming students as well. So there is quite the staff. That's 5 of us, and then our supervisor, Dr. Noah Roman-Munoz, serves as the director of the Student Success Center in Animal Sciences. So Animal Sciences encompasses both the animal science students as well as the equine science students. So we're going to go through this PowerPoint presentation that we have to kind of make you familiar with some of the stuff that your students are going to be experiencing, whether or not if they have gone through orientation or if they're going to go through orientation. And then we will open it up for questions afterwards, as we feel like there's quite a bit of information that parents have for questions in that process. What we hope you get out of it is, in this online version of orientation and registration, it is not that our registration, when the students show up for registration, they have a very small window to get both them, and oftentimes Kayla and I will have about 4 to 5 students at a time that we're trying to register. So by providing this experience here, we're hoping to mitigate that the time for registration is not the best opportunity for us to be able to answer questions for parents. So we wanted to create a whole other opportunity that parents could have that time to ask questions. So Kayla's my tech guru. Will you get our PowerPoint ready for us? Okay, so in working together with our parent and family programs here at Colorado State University, I'm using the quote that the director, John Henderson, uses, is that this is another form of driver's education. So we want to welcome you to the partnership of this process. And then that idea of another form of driver's education is that we're going to invite your student to be in that driver's seat, and that we as the advisors and the support systems in the department are going to sit in the driver's ed teacher's seat, and that we're going to invite you to be part of this process, kind of be in the back seat along with us, so that we can partner to try to help make your students' chances, the ability for them to be as successful, as strong as possible. So next slide. This is so these are the 3 leaders of the animal science department that are really integral, that we work closely with. We have Dr. Keith Belk, who's our department head. We have Dr. Terry Engel, who's the associate department head, and he's a faculty member within the department, as well as does a lot of faculty support within our department. And then Dr. Noah Roman-Munoz, who is the director of undergraduate program. She is Kayla and I's supervisor. She is a faculty member who currently teaches animal diseases, and she is a great resource in the department for student success. So I have great appreciation for working with her. So here is Kayla and I, and then Steph Lebsock is our 3rd academic success coordinator in the department, as well as we have our 2 advising assistants, both Bella and Esme, that are helping us this semester until we bring on at least 1 more, if not 2 more academic success coordinators to keep our advising numbers lower, so that we have the ability to give the students more support, have more bandwidth for how we support the students. Okay, so this is kind of what we were talking about, is that what this registration process is going to look like that your students will be going through when they come to orientation, if they haven't already come. So each advisor will be getting broken into about having 4 to 5 to possibly 6 students in that registration process. So our number one goal is to get the students into Life 102, which is their introductory biology class. And that is probably one of the most sought after classes on campus. And so it will fill up. And so we have about 10 minutes once they open that window up for us to get a student into Life 102. I have recently dealt with students are not coming prepared and not have all of their holds or all of the information that we provide to them completed. And so it delays their possibility to get into Life 102. The other day, we have a student that the only option was, because they didn't come in as completed, we had to put them into the night classes because we had to send them back out of the room to get all of their holds completed and get their information done so that they're registration ready by the time they get to us. And then the only class that we had available to get them into was an evening class. Biology is giving us a rolling opening of classes, so they give us a certain amount of classes every day to cover everybody. Whether or not we can get them into the most ideal situation or not is what we're really trying to get students to come in prepared, ready to go. Once we get them in the Life 102, then they'll either be put into ANEQ 101, the Food Animal Science class, or ANEQ 102, the Introduction to Equine Science class. And so, and then from there is where we kind of can slow things down to then have open the questions for the individual students to start asking whether or not we put them into math, or whether how we fulfill the remaining part of their schedule. But it can seem a little bit overwhelming, and it can seem a little bit rushed at the beginning. We address that with the students, and we say, just stick with us. We'll get you through into Life 102, and we'll get you into either your ANEQ 101 or your 102 class. And then we will slow it down, and we'll be able to answer some of the questions and then break off where there's a little bit more individualism on how we're going to fulfill the rest of their schedules. So this slide is how we feel parents and family have the best ability to help us have these students prepared and registration ready. And so what you can ask your students is if they have all of their registration and orientation holds removed from their main page of their RamWeb account, and that is marked by the red X. And so if the students will make sure that they have all of their red X's completed, then we, when we get ready for registration, then they're ready to go. That is including their advising, what am I thinking, Kayla? Their advising code. Their advising codes, which we have sent to them through their CSU email. They should have gotten an email from us to this point. For the remainder of registration, those have been sent out. And the information that we're telling the students that we're recommending for them to register and to get them ready, the advising code is part of that. So that is one of the red X's that they would have there in place. The other thing that they need to make sure of, and this should be coming in the email as well that's sent to them, is if they need to complete the math placement tool, as well as they need to complete the self-directed placement for their composition, if those are needed. The last thing to be prepared is if they are a student that's interested in working on their prerequisites for vet school, then they should be working on their chem prep throughout the summer If they're bringing in biology with them from a previous institution or from duplicate credit, then they would need to finish that chem prep over hopefully before registration, but they have to finish that before they can register for chemistry. So the ideal situation is that they're going to be taking chemistry in the spring of 2022. And so they won't need to have chem prep done until they register in the fall semester. That's about October, late October, early November that they'll be registering. But we heavily encourage students to do it over the summer. Otherwise, they're going to end up having to do that chem prep during that time that actually falls into the same time they would be doing midterm exams for their fall semester. And so to alleviate them spending 5 to 9 hours figuring out that chem prep situation while they're studying for their midterms, we encourage them to do it over the summer when they can possibly have more bandwidth for what that would look like for them. And then I think the last bullet is that
lessons will not be a place for parent and family questions.
Yeah, so that's the last bullet is, as I mentioned before, of why the students' orientation registration session is not the best place to be able to answer your questions. And we're really setting it up for the students to be doing that individually with their advisors and the other students on the Zoom call. Okay, so this is really like how we define the partnership of a student and an advisor. So right here, the kind of the table is how Sanford's challenge and support growth model looks, that how we're working with the student and how we're meeting them with what support levels they need is going to look very different than what that challenge and support is going to look like at the end of the year as well. So you know your students better than we do, and so helping them line up on what level of support they need at the beginning of the year in comparison to what they need at the end of the year. If our support levels look the same at the beginning of the year as it does at the end of the year, we're not setting your student up for success, and that growth model is not on board. So how we meet them and help them at the beginning, we want to encourage you all to do the same thing, that at the end of the year, giving them more leeway, that they're taking on more of that challenge so that they can experience as much growth as possible. So this is a list of kind of some of the stuff that the students need to do to take the lead in how they're working with their advisors. So the students need to initiate that communication. We are all very receptive to emails from students, and so they need to be the one that if they're not understanding something or they're not familiar with something that they need to know, they need to take the initiative to reach out to both their advisors and their faculty members and let them know that they need more information. If a student is emailing an advisor and a parent or family member is asking to be copied on that email, you need to recognize that you might not be copied back on that email. So what we need to do is you recognize that the email is going out and kind of that understanding about that timeline of when they sent it to us, and that you follow up with your student about, have you heard back from your advisor? And if so, they're sharing that information with you about what that response is so that you can have that understanding of what that looks like. And then if they're getting a response back or they need clarity, encourage your student to follow back up with us. So the more that we get, over the summer, a lot of it is happening via email, but once they're back on campus in the fall, we have advisors as well as faculty members have open office hours that we are available. Encourage your student to either email us or to follow up in person, and they can make those appointments with us so that we can follow up to help them be successful. All right, so many of our students, so you'll see at this number, 90% of our students will come in verbalizing their interest to work towards vet school prerequisites so that by the time they're done with their degree, they can apply to vet schools. In actuality, about 10% of our students actually do follow through and apply for vet school. And there's a couple different reasons for that. Vet school is very competitive and it's very difficult to get in, and they take on the extra coursework that's needed to be able to apply to those vet school programs. The other reason is, which is encouraging, is that students will get into our programs and realize a lot of what they want to do doesn't actually require them to go to vet school, and that there are some things that they can do with their degrees in both animal and equine science that enables them to go on to jobs that they didn't realize that they could do. So many students will come in and think that you either could be a farmer rancher or you go to vet school. And in our programs, they're going to see and they're going to network with a lot of different opportunities to see that there are careers and positions that they can do with their animal and equine science program. So the students will also have the ability to work with a pre-health advisor to help them with that process. We are very familiar with our program, the degrees here. We are also very familiar with the vet school prerequisites, as well as they do have, our pre-health advisors are aware of the vet school prerequisites, as well as also the involvement opportunities that can come in, whether it's a student organizations or different, what looks really good on a application for vet school. We'll have an informational session towards the beginning of the year. So I'm thinking around the end of September, we let the students kind of get in and get a little bit comfortable with their classes, as well as our faculty members. And then we will put together a informational session, kind of like a panel discussion with the DVMs within our departments, as well as a few of our individuals in our department have sat on the CSU Vet School Selection Committee. And so last year we did that for the first time, and that was very highly received by the students as well as our faculty member, to let them know who are the faces that they will have for classes and they'll see in the hallways that have DVMs, as well as great networking opportunities. And so it's going to be, again, very critical for the students that are interested in going on to complete their vet school prerequisites, that they complete the chem prep over the summer. So this is a list, and if you put in the chat session here of your emails, we will send you the PowerPoint as well as the recording for this session, and you could see some of the careers that are available by just going on, by completing their animal sciences or equine sciences degree. So again, if you're interested in that information, if you'll just put your email into the chat session, we will send that to you after this session. So we want to open this up to questions that you might have in regards to your student joining us here at CSU. And Kayla is going to read if there's information in the chat session that people might have.
So far, there are no questions in the chat.
Okay.
Okay, so we have our first question. So this one is, my daughter is interested in equine assisted therapy. Does she have to go to graduate school for that? Let me stop sharing really quick. So it depends on what kind of equine assisted therapy your daughter is interested in. There's different versions. So there's working with like courses or there's like working with humans. So it just depends on where that interest stems from. And there are different prereqs and there are some programs to get like PATH certified if they're interested in more of the human side of that, but it just depends on where their interest really lies for the assisted therapy. And so as we kind of work with that student, we would say like, okay, what are you thinking? And then we could look at the pre-health advising that Kim was talking about is great about knowing different prereqs for, like, we're really good with the vet school prereqs, right? Because we kind of do that every day, but then grad school prereqs are a bit different. So that's when we have your student kind of do some research and see like, okay, do I need to go to grad school to do this profession that I want to do and get into the career that I want to do? And that's when we kind of ask students like, let's start looking at grad programs. And by we, I mean you. And then you come back to me and we'll chat about what prereqs we need to be working on. Okay, so the next question is, can you go over the first part of the registration process again? When does that happen? So all of your students should have signed up for an orientation session. That is happening for this week, the following week, and then we have one date in August. So if they haven't already registered, hopefully they've gotten signed up at some point in the next like 2 to 3 weeks. And what happens is registration used to be a 2-day process, but with COVID, things have adapted. So now it's just a 1-day fully virtual process that students go through. And so I think at the beginning of registration, they just kind of get some general information about CSU, and then they'll go into a college informational session. And so that's when you're meeting in the College of Agriculture and you're learning about what is the College of Ag, what are the different departments, what are some of the clubs. And then after you do that, you come and meet with us in the Department of Animal Science. And so that's the Equine and Animal Science registration. So when you're meeting with us, we are getting you into classes. Like Kim said, hopefully that first bio course, that one goes pretty quickly. So registration for students definitely feels rushed. It's not as like personable as when I first started. We had one orientation in person. So it's a very different setup. So it is rushed and very different, but we're getting them into classes, whether that's the bio class, chemistry. We're doing those intro courses, so either intro to food animal science or intro to equine science. And then once they're in classes, that's pretty much it for the day. So it's a really quick 1-day orientation process that they go through and they get into courses and then they're done.
And I would say at the end of each of the session, even though the beginning seems really rushed,
yes,
by the end of the registration session that they're with us, we have them, we will individually, like I will pull up every student's schedule and ask them, you know, tell them that their schedule is in place and ask them how they feel about it, and make sure that they have all the classes that they need to have and answer any questions that they might have that I can help them with. Now, we also have, as part of it, once they come out of the breakout room and back into the main virtual room, we have peer mentors and students that are recent graduates that are also really great to answer some of the questions. For example, I always encourage them, if they have housing questions or textbooks questions, that's a great resource to ask about that. So if a student wants to ask me what they should do with textbooks, it's very interesting because when I was in school, the textbook situation looked very different than it does now. Do you buy textbooks? Do you rent textbooks? Do you do online, you know, and the online textbooks or whatever? Whereas I carried my heavy book, I highlighted everything, and you could potentially sell it back for like a quarter or two. The textbook situation looks very different nowadays, and students are pretty comfortable. And so these students, they'll give them a better idea than what I could give them in regards to textbook availability and what are some other sites besides the CSU bookstore where they can compare prices before they decide to buy. Should they buy before they get on campus or wait until they get to campus? So I feel like even though it's rushed in the beginning, there is the ability to really personalize it if the students are wanting to ask some of those questions there. But they will leave with us knowing how to get a hold of us after the session is over. If they have questions, that they can email us, and what's still needed to be in place if we didn't get them 100% of their registration completed.
All right, so the next question is, can you discuss activities that happen after move-in but before classes start for students, for families? So I think that is going to look a little different this year as well, just because of COVID and still not knowing the unknown. Typically, CSU hosts what's called RAM Welcome. The College of Ag is very unique, and we take students to different facilities around the college. So typically, students will ride buses out to Ardec, which is our off-campus farm site, and they're kind of getting like agriculture 101. So they're putting their hand inside of a steer and filling the rumen and like getting all gross and disgusting and getting covered in like guts. The cows are alive and they're very happy and they're fat, and I promise they're not like mistreated at all. And then they go into another room and then they'll do some like plant stuff, because we have horticulture. We also have like soil and crops, so they'll look at different soils. So for our RAM Welcome, it's very hands-on. I'm not sure what other colleges do. Typically, I think they host them on campus, but College of Ag, again, is unique, and we try and get that like first experience like off campus at the farm, like, hey, welcome to the College of Ag. That being said, with COVID, I'm not super sure how that's going to look this semester. I know last year RAM Welcome was online, so I've heard that we should be doing something again in person, but it hasn't been solidified yet. So that's more for students. I'm not so sure about like families. I think typically what happens is you drop off your student and then that's kind of it. I know later in the semester we have like the family week where parents and family members can come up, and I think there's like a football game and some different things that happen, but I'm not too sure about like specifically right before classes start what happens for families.
So I have heard though that, I do know that they're bringing students in a little bit earlier because they didn't have the on-campus orientation process. That they're in, typically in the past, it was Thursday and Friday that students showed up and RAM Welcome, and the carnival was that Thursday night. I think they're bringing students in earlier. I think oftentimes parents will maybe come to the carnival. It's open to the public, and so I know in the past that parents have shown up for that carnival on Thursday night. Again, I don't exactly know how much that'll look for that. Parent and family programs at CSU has a very strong communication process, and so I would make sure to tap into them. They'll be able to give you the overall what's happening with the university, and then moving the students into Saturday and Sunday is really when they part from their families and start to get acclimated to on campus by themselves. So I think that is in the works. I did hear that the carnival was still happening this year, so that's good to have that back in place.
Sorry, I'm pulling up a website for the next question. So the next question is, who does my daughter reach out to for on-campus job opportunities? So CSU uses a website called Handshake. That's where all of the job opportunities are going to be posted, whether that's work study or just you want to get a job on campus. I'm going to put that in the chat for everyone to see. One thing about work study, if it is work study related, those fill up really quickly. So I would be encouraging your students to really jump on those now over the summer before those positions fill up. Same thing with other jobs that are not work study. There's quite a few jobs, but we have a lot of students at CSU, so oftentimes they'll kind of disappear at the beginning of the semester. So if your student is interested or needs a job, I would encourage them to start looking now. And the listing should say like, this will start at the beginning of the fall semester. So that way they're not committing to working over the summer and they might not be on campus yet. So it's Handshake. I put that in the chat, and that is really the only place that jobs are posted. A lot of times the advisors in the department will get emails from different places off campus, like ranches, places looking for like ranch hands, farm help. Some vet clinics will reach out to us, and we send those out to students as well. So every once in a while, students will get an email from us like, hey, this farm is looking for X amount of people. If you're interested, here's the link to apply. So that's another way that they could see jobs. Okay, next question. So you indicated that only 10% of kids go on to vet school. When do they normally figure that out in their college career? Is it usually that they figure it out midway through their bachelor's degree? So I personally came into the department with an interest to go to vet school, and I took Life 102, which Kim has really talked up here, and I immediately changed my mind because I was like, woo, more of this and more chemistry? I think not. So I was very unique, and like the first semester was immediately like, oh, heck no, vet school's not for me. So some students do figure that out, right? I came from a school where we didn't have a super strong science background, and so I was like, wow, this probably isn't for me. And I'm still have an animal science degree and I'm happy, right? So I didn't need to go to vet school. Other students will get to like OChem and they're like, wow, I've still got to take another OChem and a biochem and a physics. And that's kind of that halfway point where they change their mind. It's also really, like Kim talked about, the exposure to other careers. Mm-hmm. So I think growing up, a lot of us were told like, to work with animals, you have to be a veterinarian, and that's not true. And so when you're taking your reproduction class, you're like, wow, I could do AI stuff and like
what is
life
AI
into the world. Oh,
Kayla, not everybody knows what AI is.
Artificial insemination. So that's like the repro stuff, like birthing babies, right? Like being the catalyst to like having certain animals give birth. Or you do nutrition and you're really good at like, you like feeds and balancing diets and like mixing that up. So that could be a career interest. Some people decide if they're really good at math, they want to do breeding, and they're going to look at like genetics all day long and see which animals are going to make the like most sustainable and healthy, right, like offspring. And so then they decide to pursue genetics, and realizing you don't have to go to vet school for that stuff. Path like assisted equine therapy, that is really becoming a big industry. Welfare behavior is really like blowing up. So a lot of students come in and they're like, wow, I didn't know that I could study animal behavior or animal welfare and go out and audit farms or I don't know, petting zoos or like feed puppy mills, right? And say like, hey, you're not treating animals correctly. So that is a career path as well. And that's really becoming a pretty big part of the industry. There's also sustainability now. That's becoming, it's like a little smaller, but it's a big thing, right? Like what's going to happen to the world? Who's going to sustain the world? And so that's a growing interest in our department as well, making sure that things are going in a way where like we're all going to be able to eat in 50 years, right? Because I don't know, I love food, so I'd still love to eat in 50 years, but that's a big part of the industry. So a lot of different interests get exposed to students, and so they really just start to figure out like, yeah, maybe vet school is not for me, but hey, I can still work with animals in some way. I believe that was the last question in the chat, so if you have other questions, you can unmute.
Otherwise, that's what we have for you. So we can hang out here for a little bit to see if anybody has any other questions that they want to ask. But really, we just want to like thank you for what you're doing to support your child in this process, and really recognize that we are here to support your students' success. And we want to be a part of that. But we also really want to set them up for how do we meet them at where they're at, and then challenge them so that they continue in this growth process, because that's when the students get the most out of this experience. And so again, I think the biggest thing that you can help in that process is to encourage your child to reach out to their advisors, reach out to their faculty members when they are not understanding or not, or they're just unsure about some process, and know that there's people here that are really working towards their success.
The chicken is up there on the thing too, if you want it.
So I would just, before you leave, if you want to leave your email address in the chat session, then we'll make sure to send you the PowerPoint as well as the recording of this session.
And then the email that we send out, I'll include some things like, where does your student send their AP scores? Because I know a lot of students have concurrent enrollment or AP. The handshake link will be in there, so y'all can look at that. I'll also link the pre-vet discussion that we had last semester, so you and your student can look through that. It's all DVMs or people who have sat on the vet school admissions board at CSU, and so they have really good thoughts and opinions. Just put some extra stuff in there because I know that is a thing. Also, I'll include the housing link. I know that some of the roommate stuff has maybe been a little unclear for some folks. I don't know either, but housing and dining is the contact for them. I did have a student talk to me about like lofting today, and I was like, well, I lofted my bed, and apparently that's not allowed anymore due to COVID restrictions, so that's new. So yes, no lofting of the beds can happen. But I'll put a bunch of contact info in there. Financial aid, they're a great contact for like billing, scholarship opportunities, anything like that. So I will include that in the email that is sent out.